silent filtration failure, the 10 dietary assassins destroying your kidneys. Your kidneys are the unsung heroes of human physiology, executing a silent, high-stakes biological ballet to purge toxins from your blood. Yet, the modern industrial food complex has weaponized our grocery aisles, turning daily sustenance into a slow-acting poison that overwhelms these delicate organs. This isn't merely about diet, it is an investigation into the molecular wreckage caused by convenience, threatening a catastrophic systemic shutdown that millions never see coming until dialysis becomes their reality. The first offender is a ubiquitous mineral that in excess transforms your bloodstream into a pressurized weapon against your own renal architecture. The sodium industrial complex, high-salt foods, processed snacks, and the instant noodle epidemic. To understand the catastrophic impact of high-salt foods on the human renal system, one must first deconstruct the evolutionary biology of the kidney itself. For millennia, the human body evolved in a low-sodium environment, scavenging for electrolytes in a world where salt was a rare, precious mineral worth its weight in gold. Our kidneys, the master chemists of our internal physiology, developed a highly efficient system to hoard sodium, ensuring that our blood pressure remains stable enough to sustain life during periods of scarcity. The renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, RAS, was perfected over millions of years to retain salt, not to excrete it in massive quantities. However, the modern industrial food complex has inverted this evolutionary paradigm in less than a century, subjecting our ancient biological machinery to a toxic onslaught it was never designed to handle. We have moved from an era of scarcity to an era of aggressive, inescapable surplus, and the primary casualty of this dietary shift is the delicate, microscopic architecture of the kidney. The consumption of processed snacks, potato chips, pretzels, cheese puffs, and the global staple of instant noodles represents the apex of this crisis. These are not merely foods, they are hyperpalatable delivery systems for sodium chloride, engineered by food scientists to hit the bliss point, a sensory profile that overrides the brain's satiety signals and encourages overconsumption. When you consume a bag of processed chips or a bowl of instant ramen, you are not simply eating, you are initiating a violent hydraulic event within your circulatory system. The influx of sodium into the bloodstream triggers an immediate biological emergency. To maintain homeostasis and dilute the excess salt, the body pulls water from the cells into the bloodstream. This process, known as osmosis, drastically increases blood volume. As the volume of blood swells, the pressure against the arterial walls rises, creating a state of systemic hypertension. While the heart bears the brunt of pumping this thickened, high-pressure sludge, it is the kidneys that face the most intricate and devastating damage. The kidney is composed of approximately 1 million microscopic filtering units called nephrons. At the head of each nephron sits the glomerulus, a tiny tuft of capillaries that acts as the primary sieve for the blood. Under normal conditions, the glomerulus filters waste while retaining essential proteins and blood cells. However, the hypertension induced by chronic high-salt intake transforms this gentle filtration process into a high-pressure assault. Imagine forcing water through a delicate coffee filter with a fire hose. Eventually, the structural integrity of the filter collapses. This is exactly what happens to the glomerulus. The relentless hydraulic pressure damages the delicate endothelial lining of the capillaries, causing scarring known as glomerulosclerosis. Once a nephron is scarred, it ceases to function. It does not regenerate, it does not heal, it dies. As more nephrons are extinguished by the relentless pressure of a high-sodium diet, the remaining nephrons must work harder to filter the entire body's blood supply, a phenomenon known as hyperfiltration. This compensatory mechanism is a death spiral. The surviving nephrons are overworked, become damaged more quickly, and eventually fail, accelerating the progression toward end-stage renal disease, ESRD. The specific case of instant noodles warrants a focused forensic analysis, as it represents perhaps the most efficient kidney-destroying product on the global market. Invented in post-war Japan as a solution to food shortages, the instant noodle has mutated into a dietary staple for billions, from college dormitories in America to the bustling streets of Seoul and Jakarta. The danger lies not just in the noodles themselves, which are often flash-fried in palm oil, adding a burden of saturated fat, but in the innocuous-looking foil seasoning packet. This sachet is a concentrated chemical weapon, often containing more than half, sometimes nearly all, of the recommended daily allowance of sodium in a single serving. When combined with the sodium already inherent in the fried noodle block, a single meal can bombard the kidneys with 1,500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium. For an individual with salt sensitivity or pre-existing hypertension, this is catastrophic. The kidneys are forced to work overtime for hours, struggling to excrete the massive load of sodium while the blood pressure spikes, causing microtrauma to the renal vessels. Furthermore, the ubiquity of sodium phosphates and other preservatives in these processed foods adds a secondary layer of toxicity. Unlike organic phosphorus found in plants, which is only partially absorbed by the body, the inorganic phosphorus used as a preservative in processed snacks and instant meals is absorbed at a rate of nearly 100%. High levels of phosphorus are toxic to the kidneys and the cardiovascular system.
In healthy bodies, the kidneys filter out excess phosphorus, but when kidney function begins to decline, often due to the hypertension caused by the salt itself, phosphorus accumulates in the blood, leaching calcium from the bones and depositing it in the heart and blood vessels. This process, known as vascular, turns flexible arteries into rigid pipes, further increasing blood pressure and accelerating kidney failure. It is a vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. The salt causes the damage that prevents the kidneys from filtering the additives that cause further damage. The cultural normalization of this high-sodium diet is perhaps the most insidious aspect of the crisis. We have been conditioned to view salt as a harmless seasoning rather than a potent vasoconstrictor. The salted label is a marketing tool, promising flavor while hiding the physiological reality of endothelial dysfunction. In the United States, the average sodium intake far exceeds the physiological limit, driven largely by processed foods where sodium serves as a preservative, a texture enhancer, and a masking agent for bitter aftertastes inherent in industrial processing. This hidden sodium means that even individuals who never touch a salt shaker are often consuming dangerous levels of the mineral. The bread, the condiments, the canned vegetables, and the savory snacks are all saturated. The long-term prognosis for a population addicted to processed salt is grim. We are seeing a rise in kidney disease among younger demographics, a trend that correlates directly with the rise of ultra-processed diets. The damage is cumulative and silent. Unlike a heart attack, which announces itself with chest pain, kidney damage from salt creates no symptoms until the organs are operating at less than 15% capacity. By the time a patient notices the swelling in their ankles or the fatigue of anemia, the glomeruli are already scarred beyond repair. The instant noodle, the bag of chips, and the pretzel are not merely snacks. They are the architects of a slow, silent organ failure, a testament to how modern convenience has outpaced our biological evolution, turning the act of eating into a game of physiological Russian roulette.
Liquid toxicity, the metabolic havoc of sugary drinks, soda, and sweetened tea. If salt is the hammer that shatters the kidney through pressure, sugar is the corrosive acid that dissolves it from the inside out. The second entry in our investigation targets a category of food that provides no nutritional value, no satiety, and no structural benefit to the human body, yet constitutes a massive percentage of the caloric intake in the modern Western diet: sugary drinks. Sodas, sweetened iced teas, energy elixirs, and fruit-flavored punches are the primary vectors for the obesity and diabetes epidemics, which are in turn the two leading causes of kidney failure globally. The mechanism by which these beverages destroy renal function is complex, multifaceted, and terrifyingly efficient. This is not simply a matter of empty calories, it is a matter of profound metabolic disruption that targets the nephrons with surgical precision. The primary villain in this liquid narrative is high fructose corn syrup, HFCS, and sucrose. When consumed in liquid form, these sugars bypass the body's natural digestive pacing. Without the fiber found in whole fruit to slow absorption, the sugar in a can of soda hits the liver like a tidal wave. This rapid influx forces the pancreas to release massive surges of insulin to regulate blood glucose levels. Over time, the cells of the body become numb to this constant insulin bombardment, leading to insulin resistance, the hallmark of type 2 diabetes. Diabetes is the single greatest enemy of the kidney. High levels of blood sugar act like shards of glass within the microscopic blood vessels of the kidney. The glucose binds to proteins in the vessel walls in a process called glycation, causing the walls to stiffen and narrow. This reduces blood flow to the nephrons and damages the filtration barrier. The basement membrane of the glomerulus thickens, and the specialized cells called podocytes, which help filter the blood, begin to detach and die. Once the podocytes are gone, the filter becomes leaky, allowing protein, which should remain in the blood, to spill into the urine. This condition, proteinuria, is the canary in the coal mine, signaling that the kidney's structural integrity is failing. However, the damage caused by sugary drinks extends beyond the well-documented pathway of diabetes. There is a specific direct toxicity associated with fructose metabolism that is often overlooked. Unlike glucose, which can be utilized by every cell in the body for energy, fructose is metabolized almost exclusively by the liver. When the liver is overwhelmed by the liquid fructose from a soda, it converts the excess into fat, leading to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and uric acid. Uric acid is a waste product that in high concentrations can crystallize. These crystals can form kidney stones, which physically obstruct the urinary tract and cause immense pain and damage. But even without forming stones, high levels of uric acid induce oxidative stress and inflammation directly within the kidney tissue. It promotes the constriction of renal arteries, reducing oxygen supply to the kidney and inducing a state of hypoxia. This fructose-induced oxidative stress is a direct assault on the renal tubules, independent of diabetes or obesity.
Furthermore, we must address the specific chemical composition of dark colas. Beyond the sugar, these beverages are acidified with phosphoric acid to give them their characteristic tang and to prevent the massive sugar content from inducing vomiting. As mentioned in the analysis of processed foods, inorganic phosphorus is absorbed efficiently and is highly taxing on the kidneys, but the interaction in sodas is particularly insidious. The high acid load forces the body to buffer the pH of the blood. To do this, the body pulls calcium from the bones. This excess calcium, now circulating in the blood, must be filtered by the kidneys. The combination of high urinary calcium and high urinary oxalate, often found in teas and sodas, creates the perfect chemical environment for the formation of calcium oxalate stones. Repeated kidney stones are not just painful, they cause scarring, obstruction, and repeated infections, all of which chip away at kidney function over decades. The cultural landscape surrounding sugary drinks has exacerbated this biological crisis. In the mid-20th century, a soda was a 6-ounce treat, a sometimes food consumed on special occasions. Today, the standard serving size has ballooned to 20, 32, or even 64 ounces. The big gulp culture has normalized the consumption of liters of liquid sugar daily. Marketing campaigns have spent billions associating these toxic concoctions with happiness, youth, athleticism, and refreshment, effectively gaslighting the public about the physiological reality of what these drinks do.
We are feeding children beverages that contain more sugar in a single serving than their ancestors consumed in a month. This early exposure sets the stage for diabesity, the dual burden of diabetes and obesity, to develop in adolescence or early adulthood, placing the kidneys under siege decades before they would naturally begin to decline. The hydration myth also plays a critical role here. Many consumers believe that because soda and sweet tea are liquid, they are hydrating. While they do provide water, the diuretic effect of the caffeine and the solute load of the sugar create a complex fluid dynamic. The high osmolarity of sugary drinks can actually dehydrate cells initially. Moreover, replacing water, the kidney's preferred medium for flushing toxins, with a sugary acidic chemical slurry deprives the organs of the very resource they need to function. The kidney requires a steady stream of clean water to maintain the pressure gradients necessary for filtration. When that water is replaced by a hypertonic sugar solution, the kidney must work harder to separate the water from the solute, increasing the metabolic workload of the renal cells. The trajectory of this consumption pattern is clear and devastating. Epidemiological studies have consistently shown a linear relationship between the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages and the decline in estimated glomerular filtration rate, eGFR. The rise of dialysis centers and strip malls across America is not a coincidence. It is the downstream consequence of a food environment that prioritizes shelf life and palatability over human health. The soda industry has fought tooth and nail against taxation and regulation, borrowing the playbook from the tobacco industry to cast doubt on the science linking their products to chronic disease. Yet the pathology is undeniable. Every sip of a sugary drink initiates a metabolic cascade that inflames the vasculature, spikes insulin, generates uric acid, and stresses the nephrons. In the grand scope of renal failure, sugary drinks represent a tragedy of choice and addiction. Unlike genetic disorders or autoimmune disorders that attack the kidneys, the damage from soda is entirely preventative. It is a self-inflicted wound, driven by an industrial machine that profits from the addiction to sweetness. By displacing water and flooding the system with fructose and phosphoric acid, we are voluntarily eroding the filters that keep us alive.
The transition from a healthy kidney to a scarred, fibrotic husk is slow, but with the daily intake of liquid sugar, it is relentless. The sweet taste on the tongue is fleeting, but the metabolic scars left on the glomeruli are permanent, leading millions toward a future where their survival depends on a machine because their body's own filters were dissolved by the very drinks they consumed for pleasure.
3. The carcinogenic cocktail, the industrial alchemy of processed meats. The third entry in our investigation brings us to the refrigerated aisles of the deli counter and the sizzling griddles of the breakfast table, where a category of food exists that is so chemically altered it barely resembles the animal from which it came. Processed meats, bacon, sausage, pepperoni, deli slices, and hot dogs represent one of the most significant dietary threats to renal health in the modern world. This is not merely a conversation about animal protein, it is a forensic examination of preservation techniques that have mutated from ancient survival strategies into modern toxicological hazards. To understand why a slice of turkey ham or a strip of bacon is an assassin of kidney function, we must peel back the layers of industrial alchemy used to keep this meat fresh, pink, and palatable for weeks, months, or even years. The danger here is a trifecta of destruction: massive sodium loads, the introduction of inorganic phosphates, and the generation of carcinogenic compounds known as nitrosamines. Historically, the curing of meat was a necessity. Our ancestors used salt and smoke to preserve precious protein through harsh winters, preventing the growth of botulism and other deadly bacteria. However, the modern meat processing industry has taken this concept and industrialized it to a grotesque degree. The primary agent of concern is the use of nitrates and nitrites, sodium nitrite.
These compounds are added to processed meats not just for preservation, but for aesthetics. Without them, meat turns a distinct, unappetizing gray as it oxidizes. Nitrites bind to the myoglobin in the muscle tissue, fixing the color into a vibrant, unnatural pink or red that consumers associate with freshness. When you look at a hot dog or a slice of salami, you are looking at a chemical illusion, a cosmetic enhancement masking the reality of dead tissue. The problem arises when these nitrates and nitrites enter the human body. While they can be found naturally in vegetables like spinach and beets, the biochemical context is entirely different. In vegetables, they are accompanied by antioxidants like vitamin C, which inhibit their conversion into harmful compounds. In processed meats, however, they are often consumed in the absence of these protective antioxidants and in the presence of proteins, amines.
When exposed to high heat, such as a frying pan for bacon, or the acidic environment of the stomach, these nitrites react with amines to form nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are potent carcinogens and oxidative stressors. For the kidneys, which are responsible for filtering the metabolic byproducts of digestion, the presence of nitrosamines creates a state of chronic oxidative stress. This stress damages the DNA of renal cells and triggers inflammation in the endothelial lining of the kidney's blood vessels. It is a slow chemical burn that degrades the organ's functional capacity over time. Beyond the nitrates, we must return to the issue of sodium, but with a specific aggravated context unique to processed meats. In the previous section, we discussed salt in dry snacks. In processed meats, the sodium is often injected directly into the muscle fibers in a brine solution to increase water retention. This is known in the industry as plumping. By injecting water and salt, manufacturers increase the weight of the product, selling water for the price of meat. For the consumer, this means that a single serving of deli meat can contain a staggering percentage of their daily sodium limit. But the salt in processed meat is particularly insidious because it is often paired with inorganic phosphorus. Phosphate additives are used to improve texture, allowing the meat to hold moisture and maintain a juicy mouthfeel even after being processed and packaged. As touched upon briefly before, the distinction between organic and inorganic phosphorus is critical. The phosphorus found naturally in a steak or a piece of chicken is bound to cellular structures and is not fully absorbed by the human digestive tract. Only about 60% makes it into the bloodstream. The inorganic phosphorus used in processed deli meats, however, is a free salt. It is 90% to 100% bioavailable. When you consume a ham sandwich or a breakfast sausage, you are flooding your bloodstream with a surge of phosphorus that the kidneys must immediately filter. In the early stages of kidney decline, the organs struggle to excrete this excess phosphorus. The mineral begins to accumulate in the blood, triggering a hormonal cascade involving the parathyroid hormone, PTA, and fibroblast growth factor 23, FGF23. These hormones pull calcium from the bones to balance the phosphorus, leading to calcification of the vascular system, essentially the arteries turning into stone. This vascular stiffness increases blood pressure further, creating a feedback loop of destruction that hammers the delicate nephrons. We must also analyze the protein structure itself. Processed meats are often mechanically separated, a euphemism for a process where bones and carcasses are pushed through high-pressure sieves to strip every scrap of tissue. This slurry is then reconstituted with binders, fillers, and fats. The result is a product that is high in saturated fats and cholesterol. When the kidneys are forced to filter the byproducts of this high-protein, high-fat chemical sludge, they undergo a process called hyperfiltration. The glomerulus increases its filtration rate to handle the excessive solute load. While this might sound like increased efficiency, it is actually a stress response. It is the biological equivalent of redlining a car engine. The increased pressure and flow rate cause physical shear stress on the podocytes, the specialized cells that wrap around the capillaries of the glomerulus. Once these podocytes detach due to the stress, the filter is permanently compromised. The cultural footprint of processed meat is vast and difficult to escape. It is the centerpiece of the all-American breakfast, the staple of the school lunchbox, and the star of the ballpark experience. We have romanticized bacon to the point of fetishization, ignoring the World Health Organization's classification of processed meats as Group 1 carcinogens, placing them in the same category as tobacco and asbestos. While the cancer risk grabs the headlines, the renal risk is arguably more immediate and pervasive. The daily consumption of a ham sandwich or a morning side of sausage is a daily assault on the renal vasculature. Furthermore, there is the issue of meat sweats, a colloquial term that actually hints at a physiological distress signal. The thermogenic effect of processing such dense, salty, chemically laden protein raises body temperature and metabolic rate, taxing the system. The body must work overtime to break down the complex proteins, neutralize the acids formed during digestion, and excrete the massive sodium and phosphate load. For a person with compromised kidney function, which includes millions of undiagnosed individuals, processed meat is akin to throwing gasoline on a smoldering fire. The breakdown of these meats produces high levels of urea and nitrogenous waste.
elevating BUN blood urea nitrogen levels and forcing the remaining healthy nephrons to work at maximum capacity to prevent uremia, blood poisoning. In the grand narrative of kidney failure, processed meat serves as a pervasive, low-level toxin. It is not a sudden poison, but a chronic erosion of health. It represents the triumph of shelf life over human life. The nitrates that keep the bologna pink for weeks are the same agents turning the kidney's filtration barriers into scar tissue. The convenience of a pre-packaged lunch comes at the cost of vascular flexibility and glomerular integrity. By consuming these products, we are effectively outsourcing our digestion to industrial vats, accepting a chemical load that our evolutionary biology is ill-equipped to handle, and asking our kidneys to clean up a mess that is chemically designed to be difficult to process.
4. The deep-fried assault, fast food, trans fats, and the crispy path to renal failure. Entry number 4 takes us into the neon-lit world of the drive-thru, a ubiquitous feature of the modern landscape that offers instant gratification at the cost of long-term physiological ruin. Fast food and fried foods represent a unique and potent threat to kidney health, distinct from the singular issues of salt or sugar. This is a threat defined by the synergy of toxicity, the combination of oxidized lipids, extreme caloric density, inflammatory compounds formed by high heat cooking, and the sheer volume of consumption. When we discuss fast food, we are discussing a dietary profile that is engineered to be addictive while simultaneously dismantling the vascular highways that sustain the kidneys. The French fry, the breaded chicken nugget, and the deep-fried onion ring are not merely high-calorie treats. They are delivery vehicles for advanced glycation end products, AGEs, and trans fatty acids that clog, inflame, and stiffen the renal architecture. The centerpiece of this toxicity is the deep fryer. To understand the damage, one must understand the chemistry of the oil. In a fast food setting, oil is kept hot for hours, sometimes days, and used repeatedly. This continuous heating causes the oil to undergo thermal oxidation and polymerization. The fats break down into free radicals and reactive aldehydes. When a potato or a piece of chicken is submerged in this bubbling vat, it absorbs these degraded, oxidized fats like a sponge. When you consume these foods, you are ingesting millions of free radicals that trigger systemic inflammation. The kidneys are highly vascular organs. They receive roughly 20% of the heart's entire output with every beat. This means they are disproportionately exposed to inflammatory markers circulating in the blood. The oxidative stress caused by rancid fried oils attacks the endothelial cells lining the renal arteries, promoting atherosclerosis, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries. This leads to a condition known as renal artery stenosis. Just as the coronary arteries in the heart can become clogged with plaque leading to a heart attack, the renal arteries can become clogged with atherosclerosis induced by a diet high in fried foods and bad fats. When the renal arteries narrow, blood flow to the kidneys is restricted. The kidneys, sensing a drop in blood pressure due to the restricted flow, panic. They release renin,
a hormone that signals the body to increase systemic blood pressure to force blood through the blockage. This creates a tragic paradox. The body develops severe hypertension to feed the starving kidneys, but that very hypertension further damages the delicate vessels within the kidneys themselves. It is a self-destructive loop fueled by the consumption of deep-fried lipids. We must also address the concept of advanced glycation end products, AGEs. AGEs are harmful compounds that form when proteins or fats combine with sugar in the bloodstream, but they also form in foods that are exposed to high temperatures, such as grilling, frying, or roasting. The browning of a French fry or the crispy coating of fried chicken is the visual evidence of the Maillard reaction, a chemical reaction that creates flavor but also generates massive amounts of dietary AGEs. The body has a limited capacity to eliminate these compounds, and the burden falls almost entirely on the kidneys. When the intake of AGEs from fried foods is excessive, they accumulate in the tissues. In the kidneys, AGEs cross-link with the proteins in the glomerulus, effectively gumming up the works. They cause the basement membrane of the filter to thicken and lose its selectivity, leading to the leakage of protein into the urine and the gradual sclerosis, scarring of the renal tissue. The fast food ecosystem is also the primary driver of the obesity epidemic, which has a direct mechanical impact on kidney function. Fast food is calorically dense but nutritionally void. A single value meal can contain the caloric requirement for an entire day. This excess energy is stored as visceral fat, the dangerous fat that wraps around the internal organs. In the context of the kidney, excess abdominal fat creates physical pressure on the renal veins and the kidneys themselves. This increases the intra-abdominal pressure, which compresses the kidneys and impedes the outflow of blood. This condition, known as obesity-related glomerulopathy, forces the kidneys to work against a pressure gradient, leading to hyperfiltration and eventual burnout. The physical weight of the visceral fat literally crushes the kidney's ability to function efficiently. Moreover, the combo meal represents a perfect storm of renal destruction. It combines the high sodium of the fries, entry number 1, the liquid sugar of the soda, entry number 2, and the oxidized fats of the burger or fried chicken, entry number 4.
This simultaneous assault overwhelms the body's homeostatic mechanisms. The salt spikes the blood pressure, the sugar spikes the insulin, the fat induces inflammation. The kidney is attacked on 3 fronts simultaneously. This synergy is critical to understand. The damage is not additive, it is exponential. The inflammation caused by the fried food makes the blood vessels more susceptible to the damage caused by the pressure from the salt, while the insulin resistance from the soda weakens the kidney's ability to repair itself. We must also consider the socioeconomic dimension of this entry. Fast food is often the most accessible and affordable option in low-income areas, known as food deserts. These are the same demographics that show disproportionately high rates of end-stage renal disease, ESRD. The reliance on the deep fryer is not always a choice of preference, but of circumstance. However, the physiological outcome remains the same regardless of the intent. The ubiquity of fast food has normalized a diet that is fundamentally incompatible with vascular health. We have generations now raising children on chicken nuggets and fries, priming their renal systems for failure before they even reach adulthood. The trans fat ban implemented in many countries has created a false sense of security. While industrial trans fats, partially hydrogenated oils, have been reduced, they have often been replaced by interesterified fats and palm oils, which still pose significant risks to cardiovascular and renal health. Furthermore, many restaurants still use oils that, while technically trans fat-free in the bottle, degrade into harmful compounds once heated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 hours a day. The crispy texture that consumers crave is essentially a matrix of damaged lipids. In the final analysis of fast food and fried foods, we are looking at a mechanism of injury that is both chemical and structural. The oxidized oils degrade the lining of the blood vessels, the ages stiffen the filters, the caloric excess leads to obesity that physically compresses the organs. It is a slow, pleasurable suicide. The immediate gratification of the crunch and the salt hit masks the silent, progressive narrowing of the renal arteries. By the time the damage becomes symptomatic, the intricate network of capillaries that make up the kidney has been ravaged by years of inflammation and oxidative stress. The drive-through window is in many ways
a portal to the dialysis clinic, trading minutes of convenience for years of life expectancy.
5. The protein paradox, the hemodynamic burden of excess red meat. Entry number 5 demands a confrontation with one of the most culturally ingrained and mythologized staples of the human diet, red meat. For centuries, the consumption of beef, lamb, and venison has been associated with vitality, strength, and affluence. From the feasting tables of medieval kings to the steakhouses of Wall Street, red meat is the symbol of power. However, beneath the searing char of a ribeye lies a complex physiological challenge that, when engaged in excess, levies a heavy tax on the renal system. The danger of excess red meat is fundamentally different from the toxicity of sugar or the direct damage of salt. It is a mechanical and chemical burden that forces the kidneys into a state of overdrive, a condition clinically as hyperfiltration. To understand this, we must look past the macronutrient profile and delve into the hemodynamics of the nephron and the acid-base chemistry of the blood. When a human consumes a large quantity of animal protein, the body initiates a metabolic sequence that results in a surge of amino acids entering the bloodstream. Unlike carbohydrates or fats, which have relatively clean metabolic byproducts, primarily carbon dioxide and water, protein metabolism is dirty. It produces nitrogenous waste, specifically urea and ammonia. The kidneys are the sole organs responsible for filtering and excreting this waste. To handle the sudden influx of protein-derived solutes, the kidneys must increase the glomerular filtration rate, GFR. They do this by dilating the afferent arteriole, the inlet vessel, and constricting the efferent arteriole, the outlet vessel, of the glomerulus. This creates a pressure differentials that forces more blood through the filter at a higher speed. This is hyperfiltration. In the short term, this is a functional adaptation, a revving of the engine to handle a heavy load. However, when a diet consists of excess red meat daily, burgers for lunch, steaks for dinner, this redding becomes the permanent operating state. Imagine a car engine designed to cruise at 3,000 RPM being forced to run at 7,000 RPM for decades. Eventually, the gaskets blow, the pistons warp, and the engine seizes. This is the fate of the hyperfiltering kidney. The chronic high pressure within the glomerulus causes physical shear stress on the delicate capillary walls. Over time, this leads to glomerulosclerosis, the scarring of the filtering units. Once scarred, they cannot filter. The remaining healthy nephrons must then take on an even greater load, increasing their own hyperfiltration, which accelerates their own destruction. It is a cascading failure mechanism driven by the sheer volume of animal protein. But the hemodynamic stress is only half of the equation. We must also investigate the acid load. Red meat is rich in sulfur-containing amino acids, such as methionine and cysteine. When these are metabolized, they oxidize into sulfuric acid. The human body maintains a strictly regulated blood pH between 7.35 and 7.45. Even a minor deviation from this range is fatal. Therefore, when the consumption of red meat dumps a load of sulfuric acid into the system, the body must buffer it immediately. The kidneys are the primary agents of this buffering. They produce ammonia to neutralize the acid and excrete it as ammonium in the urine. While this keeps you alive today, the chronic production of ammonia is toxic to the kidney tissue itself. High levels of renal ammonia trigger the complement system, an immune response that causes inflammation and fibrosis, scarring in the tubulo-interstitium, the structural framework of the kidney. Essentially, in the process of saving the blood from acidosis, the kidney slowly sacrifices its own structural integrity. This is known as the acid hypothesis of kidney progression, and it explains why plant-based proteins, which are generally alkaline-forming, do not cause the same level of damage. Furthermore, we must address the role of heme iron. Red meat is the primary source of heme iron, which is absorbed far more efficiently than the non-heme iron found in plants. While iron is essential for oxygen transport, in excess, heme iron acts as a pro-oxidant. Free iron can catalyze the production of hydroxyl radicals, extremely reactive molecules that tear apart DNA and cell membranes. In the kidney, this oxidative stress contributes to the injury of the renal tubules. This is compounded by the presence of saturated fats often found in marbled cuts of meat, which drives systemic inflammation and lipid deposition within the kidney cells, a condition known as fatty kidney. A more recent and disturbing discovery in the investigation of red meat is the role of the gut microbiome. When we eat red meat, the gut bacteria digest nutrients like choline and carnitine. In doing so, they produce a compound called trimethylamine, TMA.
The liver then converts this into trimethylamine and oxide, or TMAO. High levels of TMAO in the blood have been strongly linked to the development of chronic kidney disease and cardiovascular events. TMAO appears to directly promote renal fibrosis, the formation of scar tissue that replaces healthy kidney cells. It effectively turns the soft, permeable tissue of the kidney into stiff, non-functional leather. This gut-kidney axis reveals that the damage from red meat is not just about what is in the meat, but how our internal ecosystem processes it into a uremic toxin. The cultural obsession with high-protein diets, from Atkins to paleo to carnivore, has exacerbated this risk. We have created a nutritional narrative that vilifies carbohydrates while crowning protein as the nutrient of immortality. This reductionist view ignores the biological reality of renal workload. For a young, healthy individual, the kidneys have a renal reserve that can handle occasional surges in protein. But for the millions of people with undiagnosed prediabetes, hypertension, or early-stage kidney decline, the carnivore approach is akin to throwing a brick on the accelerator of a car heading toward a cliff. The massive protein load accelerates the decline of residual kidney function. We also see a historical correlation with the King's disease, or gout. Gout is a form of arthritis caused by the crystallization of uric acid in the joints. Uric acid is the breakdown product of purines, which are found in high concentrations in red meat and organ meats. While gout manifests as joint pain, the underlying hyperuricemia, high uric acid, is a direct assault on the kidneys. Uric acid crystals can form stones within the kidney, causing obstruction and physical damage. Even without stones, soluble uric acid induces inflammation in the renal arteries and contributes to hypertension. The historical prevalence of gout among the aristocracy, who were the only ones who could afford to eat meat daily, was an early epidemiological warning sign of the renal toxicity of excess animal protein. The implications of this entry are profound. It challenges the center of the plate paradigm that dominates Western cuisine. It suggests that the 16-ounce steak is not a reward, but a physiological stress test. The data suggests that substituting just one serving of red meat per day with a plant-based protein source or poultry can significantly reduce the risk of developing end-stage renal disease.
This is not a call for universal vegetarianism, but a plea for the recognition of biological limits. The human kidney evolved to handle a diet of scarcity, where meat was an occasional windfall, not a thrice-daily guarantee. By inundating our system with animal protein, we are forcing an ancient filtration system to cope with a modern excess, and the price is paid in the slow, irreversible sclerosis of the nephrons.
6. The frozen wasteland, the chemical matrix of highly processed frozen meals. Entry number 6 transports us to the sub-zero aisles of the supermarket, where the humming glass cases hold the promise of ultimate convenience, the frozen meal. The TV dinner, born in the post-war boom of the 1950s, revolutionized the American evening, liberating households from the stove and tethering them to the television. However, this shift from culinary creation to microwave reheating came with a hidden biological cost. Highly processed frozen meals are not merely food that has been frozen. They are sophisticated chemical matrices designed to survive months of suspended animation and emerge tasting edible. To achieve this feat of preservation and palatability, food scientists rely on a cocktail of sodium, additives, and packaging materials that constitute a direct and multifaceted threat to kidney health.
The primary offender in the frozen meal is, once again, sodium, but the context here is specific and aggravated. Freezing food dulls the taste buds. A dish that tastes perfectly seasoned at room temperature will taste bland and insipid when reheated from a frozen block. To compensate for this sensory loss, manufacturers saturate frozen meals with astronomical levels of salt. A single healthy frozen entree can contain 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams of sodium, nearly the entire daily limit recommended for someone with kidney concerns. This sodium is not just for flavor, it is a preservative, preventing the growth of pathogens during the long supply chain journey. We have already established the hydraulic damage sodium causes to the kidneys, entry number 1, but in frozen meals, this sodium is often delivered in a bolus, consumed rapidly, causing acute spikes in blood pressure that hammer the renal vasculature. However, the more insidious threat in frozen meals is the presence of inorganic phosphorus, often listed on labels as sodium phosphate, diphosphate, or triphosphate. These additives are the secret sauce of the processed food industry. They act as emulsifiers, preventing the oil and water and sauces from separating during freezing. They act as texturizers, keeping the meat in the meal from becoming dry and rubbery. As discussed in previous entries, inorganic phosphorus is absorbed by the body with terrifying efficiency, nearly 100% absorption compared to the 40-60% absorption of natural phosphorus found in whole foods.
The impact of this hidden phosphorus on the kidney is catastrophic. The kidneys are responsible for regulating phosphorus levels in the blood. When the system is flooded with highly bioavailable inorganic phosphates from a frozen dinner, the kidneys struggle to excrete the excess. This leads to hyperphosphatemia. The body, sensing the imbalance, pulls calcium from the bones to bind with the phosphorus. This calcium-phosphorus product then deposits itself in the soft tissues of the body, specifically the blood vessels. This process is known as vascular calcification. It turns the flexible, elastic arteries of the kidney into rigid, calcified pipes. This stiffness increases the pulse pressure, the force of the blood wave hitting the capillaries, which shatters the delicate microvasculature of the glomerulus. Furthermore, high phosphorus levels trigger the release of fibroblast growth factor 23, a hormone that, while necessary for phosphate regulation, is associated with left ventricular hypertrophy, enlargement of the heart, and increased mortality in kidney patients. We must also scrutinize the matrix of the food itself. Frozen meals are the epitome of ultra-processed foods. The ingredients are often pre-cooked, dehydrated, reconstituted, extruded, and flash frozen. This processing destroys the natural food matrix, the fiber and structural integrity that slows digestion. The result is a meal that is rapidly digested, causing spikes in blood sugar and insulin. Many frozen meals, even savory ones, contain hidden sugars and modified cornstarches to improve texture and mouthfeel after microwaving. This contributes to the metabolic syndrome, obesity, hypertension, hyperglycemia, that drive the majority of kidney failure cases. The vegetables in these meals are often stripped of their natural potassium and water-soluble vitamins during the blanching process before freezing, leaving behind a fiberless, nutrient-poor husk that provides none of the protective benefits of fresh produce. Another critical, often overlooked dimension of the frozen meal risk is the packaging. These meals are almost exclusively packaged in plastic trays or plastic-lined cardboard cupboard heated in a microwave. When plastic is heated, especially in the presence of fatty foods like the cheese or gravy in a frozen meal, it can leach endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs, such as phthalates and bisphenols, BPA, BPS, into the food.
The kidneys are a primary target for these environmental toxins. Studies have shown that phthalates are associated with albuminuria, the leakage of protein into the urine, a marker of kidney damage, and oxidative stress within the renal tissue. These chemicals interfere with the hormonal regulation of the kidney and can promote inflammation. By relying on microwavable meals, consumers are essentially seasoning their food with microdoses of plasticizers that accumulate in the body over time. The cultural marketing of frozen meals adds a layer of deception. Brands often use terms like lean, smart, healthy, or fit to target weight-conscious consumers. These products reduce calories and fat, but often compensate by increasing the sodium and phosphate load to maintain flavor. A consumer might believe they are making a responsible choice by eating a 300-calorie frozen lasagna, unaware that they are ingesting a chemical bomb that stresses their kidneys far more than a home-cooked meal with fresh ingredients would. This health halo is dangerous because it encourages daily consumption. For the elderly or the isolated, frozen meals are often a dietary staple, leading to a demographic that is doubly vulnerable, aging kidneys with reduced function being bombarded by a high-sodium, high-phosphate diet. The socioeconomic aspect is also vital. Frozen processed foods are often cheaper and more accessible than fresh produce and meats, particularly in food deserts. This economic reality means that low-income populations are disproportionately exposed to the nephrotoxic effects of these industrial food products. The convenience comes with a long-term biological mortgage. The time saved in the kitchen is eventually paid back in the time spent in doctors' offices and dialysis clinics. In the final analysis, the highly processed frozen meal represents the industrialization of eating at its most extreme. It is a product where chemistry has replaced cookery. The reliance on inorganic phosphates to maintain texture and sodium to
simulate flavor, creates a profile that is uniquely hostile to renal health. The kidney, an organ designed to filter the subtle waste products of natural metabolism, is ill-equipped to handle the concentrated burst of bioavailable minerals and synthetic additives found in these trays. Every time the microwave beeps, it signals the ingestion of a meal that hardens the arteries, leaches calcium from the bones,
and scars the filters of the kidney. It is a cold, calculated trade-off where shelf stability is prioritized over the stability of human physiology.
7. The ghost in the sugar, the metabolic deception of artificial sweeteners. Entry number 7 forces us to confront one of the most successful marketing coups in the history of the food industry, the promise of sweetness without consequence. For decades, artificial sweeteners, aspartame, saccharin, sucralose, and acesulfame potassium have been sold as the technological salvation for a society addicted to sugar but terrified of obesity. The diet soda, the zero-calorie energy drink, and the pink, blue, and yellow packets on every diner table in America represent a collective attempt to cheat biology. The premise is seductive: trick the tongue, spare the waistline. However, emerging science and longitudinal epidemiological data suggest that while we may be fooling our taste buds, we are not fooling our kidneys. In fact, the chronic consumption of high-intensity artificial sweeteners may be driving a specific insidious form of renal decline that is all the more dangerous because the consumer believes they are making a healthy choice. To understand the threat, we must look at the diet soda paradox, revealed in large-scale population studies. The Nurses' Health Study, a massive epidemiological undertaking involving over 3,000 women over more than a decade, uncovered a startling correlation. It found that women who consumed 2 or more servings of artificially sweetened soda per day experienced a 2-fold increase in the risk of kidney function decline compared to those who did not. This decline was specifically measured by the glomerular filtration rate, the gold standard for assessing how well the kidneys are cleaning the blood. What makes this finding so disturbing is that the same decline was not associated with sugar sweeter soda soda's specific cohort, though sugar has its own risks as detailed in entry number 2. This suggests that there is a unique, independent toxicity associated with the synthetic chemicals used to replace sugar, a mechanism of injury that bypasses the traditional pathways of diabetes and hits the renal architecture directly. One of the primary theories explaining this toxicity revolves around the cephalic phase insulin response. The human body is not merely a chemical vat, it is a predictive machine. When the tongue tastes sweetness, the brain anticipates a surge of glucose. It signals the pancreas to release insulin to manage the incoming sugar load. However, in the case of a diet soda, the sugar never arrives.
The insulin is released into the bloodstream with nothing to act upon. This frequent false alarm can lead to a state of insulin resistance over time. As we have established, insulin resistance is a precursor to type 2 diabetes, the leading cause of kidney failure. By constantly teasing the metabolic system with the promise of energy that never manifests, artificial sweeteners may be inducing the very metabolic derangement they were designed to prevent, stressing the kidneys through chronic hyperinsulinemia. Furthermore, we must examine the chemical composition of these sweeteners and how they are processed by the renal system. Take saccharin, for example. It is a sulfonamide, a class of compounds that can precipitate allergic reactions and cross-reactivities in sensitive individuals. While approved for use, it is a xenobiotic, a foreign chemical substance that the body does not recognize as food. The kidneys are the primary route of excretion for many of these unchanged chemicals. By inundating the kidneys with liters of fluid containing concentrated xenobiotics, we are forcing the nephrons to filter a chemical soup that human evolution never encountered. There is also the issue of aspartame, which breaks down into phenylalanine, aspartic acid, and methanol in the body. While the industry argues these are harmless in small amounts, the long-term cumulative effect of these metabolites on the renal tubules, specifically regarding oxidative stress and the formation of free radicals, remains a subject of intense scientific scrutiny. A more recent and profound area of investigation is the impact of artificial sweeteners on the gut microbiome, a relationship known as the gut-kidney axis. The human gut is populated by trillions of bacteria that play a crucial role in metabolism and immunity. Recent studies indicate that non-caloric artificial sweeteners, NAS, are not biologically inert as previously claimed. They can dramatically alter the composition of the gut microbiome, killing off beneficial bacteria and promoting the growth of strains associated with glucose intolerance and inflammation. When the gut barrier is compromised, a condition often called leaky gut, bacterial endotoxins, lipopolysaccharides, can leak into the bloodstream. The kidneys must filter these toxins. This induces a state of chronic low-grade systemic inflammation. The inflammatory markers circulate through the delicate capillaries of the glomeruli,
causing endothelial dysfunction and gradual scarring. Thus, the diet soda acts as a saboteur, disrupting the ecosystem of the gut to launch an indirect attack on the kidneys. We must also consider the psychological and behavioral impact known as the compensation effect. The consumption of artificial sweeteners often provides a psychological license to overconsume calories elsewhere. A consumer might rationalize a double cheeseburger and large fries because they ordered a Diet Coke. This behavior creates a dietary profile high in sodium, saturated fat, and processed ingredients, all kidney risks, with the artificial sweetener serving as the enabling factor. Moreover, these sweeteners are hundreds of times sweeter than natural sugar. Chronic exposure desensitizes the palate to natural sweetness. Fruit begins to taste bland, vegetables taste bitter.
This shifts the overall diet away from kidney-protective whole foods and towards hyperpalatable, ultra-processed foods that act as vehicles for sodium and phosphates. The cultural history of these substances adds a layer of tragedy to the medical reality. Saccharin was discovered by accident in a coal tar lab in the late 19th century. Cyclamates were banned in the 1960s due to cancer fears. Aspartame has been the subject of more FDA complaints than almost any other food additive. Yet they have become integrated into the fabric of daily life, marketed as the sophisticated choice for the modern, weight-conscious individual. We have normalized the ingestion of synthetic molecules to such a degree that water, the only beverage the kidney truly craves, has been displaced by chemical approximations of fruit and cola. The zero sugar movement has allowed the beverage industry to pivot away from the demonization of high fructose corn syrup while maintaining their grip on consumer addiction to sweetness. There is also a specific concern regarding sucralose, often marketed as Splenda. Sucralose is made by chlorinating sucrose, replacing hydroxyl groups with chlorine atoms. This makes the molecule unrecognizable to the body as a carbohydrate, so it passes through undigested. However, the presence of chlorine in a food molecule is rare in nature and often associated with toxicity. While regulatory bodies deem it safe, the environmental impact of excreted sucralose is already visible. It is so stable that it passes through wastewater treatment plants and can be found in rivers and oceans.
If it is stable enough to survive industrial sewage treatment, we must ask what burden it places on the delicate filtration membranes of the human kidney over a lifetime of consumption. Ultimately, the danger of artificial sweeteners lies in their disruption of homeostasis. The kidney functions best when the internal environment is stable and predictable. Artificial sweeteners introduce chaos, a sweet taste without calories, a chemical structure that mimics food but provides no nutrition, and a disruption of the bacterial allies in our gut. They represent a pharmacological approach to diet, treating the desire for sweetness as a condition to be managed with chemicals, rather than a behavior to be moderated. For the kidney, which must process every molecule that enters the blood, there is no such thing as a free pass. The metabolic debt accrued by tricking the body is eventually paid in the currency of renal function, manifesting as the slow, silent hardening of the glomeruli in a population that thought they were doing the right thing.
8. High-octane overload, the vasoconstrictive violence of energy drinks. Entry number 8 moves us from the deceptive world of diet sodas to the aggressive, high-voltage realm of energy drinks. This is a category of beverage that did not exist 40 years ago, but has now become a multi-billion-dollar staple of the modern workforce, the student body, and a gaming community. Energy drinks, Red Bull, Monster, Rockstar, Bang, and their endless imitators, are not simply caffeinated beverages. They are unregulated pharmacological cocktails designed to override the body's natural fatigue signals. By combining massive doses of caffeine with taurine, guarana, L-carnitine, ginseng, and B vitamins, these drinks create a synergistic toxicity that places an unprecedented hemodynamic burden on the kidneys. This is not about the gentle morning lift of a cup of coffee. This is about a violent, chemically induced vasoconstriction that squeezes the life out of the renal arteries. To comprehend the risk, we must analyze the hemodynamics of caffeine in high concentrations. Caffeine is a potent vasoconstrictor, meaning it causes blood vessels to tighten and narrow. In moderate amounts, the body can compensate for this. However, energy drinks often contain anywhere from 160 milligrams to 500 milligrams of caffeine per can, equivalent to drinking 4 or 5 cups of coffee in a matter of minutes. When this massive bolus of stimulant hits the bloodstream, it triggers an acute spike in blood pressure. The systolic pressure rises and the heart rate accelerates. For the kidneys, which rely on a steady, regulated flow of blood to filter toxins, this is catastrophic. The renal arteries constrict, reducing blood flow to the organ itself. This state of relative ischemia, lack of oxygen, induces oxidative stress within the kidney tissue. If this occurs daily or multiple times a day, the temporary constriction becomes chronic hypertension, the silent killer of kidney function. The danger is compounded by the energy blend ingredients, specifically guarana. Guarana is a South American plant whose seeds contain twice the caffeine concentration of coffee beans. In many jurisdictions, the caffeine derived from guarana does not have to be listed in the total caffeine count on the nutritional label. This means the consumer is often ingesting far more stimulant than they realize. The interaction between caffeine and taurine is also a subject of concern, while taurine is naturally found in the body.
The synthetic taurine used in these drinks is present in concentrations that far exceed dietary norms. Some studies suggest that the combination of these ingredients can alter calcium signaling in the heart and kidney cells, potentially leading to arrhythmias and renal electrolyte imbalances. We must also address the diuretic effect. Caffeine is a diuretic. It forces the kidneys to excrete more water. Energy drinks are often consumed in situations where the individual is already dehydrated, during intense exercise, late-night study sessions, or after a night of drinking alcohol. This creates a dangerous perfect storm. The body is dehydrated, the blood is thickening, and the energy drink forces the kidneys to expel what little water remains. This leads to a highly concentrated urine, saturated with minerals like calcium and oxalate. This is the ideal environment for the formation of kidney stones. Nephrologists have noted a rise in kidney stones among young adults, a demographic historically at low risk, coinciding perfectly with the rise of energy drink culture. A kidney stone is not just a painful inconvenience. It causes physical obstruction, backup of urine, hydronephrosis, and scarring that can permanently reduce kidney function. Furthermore, there is the risk of rhabdomyolysis, a severe and life-threatening condition that has been linked to excessive energy drink consumption, particularly when combined with physical exertion. Rhabdo occurs when muscle tissue breaks down rapidly, releasing a protein called myoglobin into the bloodstream. Myoglobin is toxic to the kidneys. The large molecules clog the filtering tubules, causing acute kidney injury, AKI. The stimulants in energy drinks allow users to push past their natural pain thresholds during workouts, increasing the risk of muscle damage, while the vasoconstrictive effects of the caffeine reduce the kidney's ability to flush the myoglobin out. We are seeing cases of young, healthy individuals landing in the emergency room with kidneys in acute failure, their urine the color of tea, solely because they combined a pre-workout energy drink with a high-intensity gym session. The sugar content in non-diet energy drinks adds another layer of toxicity, linking back to entry number 2. A single can may contain 50 to 60 grams of sugar. When this is slammed into the system alongside the stimulants, it creates a metabolic crisis. The sugar spikes insulin, the caffeine spikes cortisol and adrenaline.
This hormonal chaos puts the body in a fight or flight mode, diverting resources away from maintenance functions like filtration and repair. The kidneys are left to deal with the aftermath, a sludge of high glucose, high insulin, high cortisol, and inflammatory markers. It is a recipe for accelerated aging of the organ. Culturally, the energy drink has been marketed as the fuel for the hustle. It is the beverage of the gamer, the long-haul trucker, the night shift nurse, and the cramming student. The branding is aggressive, masculine, and extreme, normalizing the idea that the human body is a machine that can be overclocked. We have lost respect for the biological need for rest. By chemically overriding fatigue, we are ignoring the body's warning signals. The kidney, which requires the downtime of sleep to perform restorative maintenance, is denied this recovery period. Instead, it is subjected to a 24-hour cycle of stimulant-induced pressure. The lack of regulation is arguably the most terrifying aspect of the century. Unlike soda, which is regulated as food, many energy drinks operate in a gray area, sometimes classified as dietary supplements. This allows them to bypass strict FDA limits on caffeine content and ingredient safety testing. We are effectively conducting a massive, uncontrolled clinical trial on the youth of the world. We are seeing the early results in the form of palpitations, hypertension, and early-stage renal damage in teenagers. The long-term prognosis is unknown, but the physiological principles are clear. You cannot chronically constrict the blood supply to a vital organ, dehydrate it, and bombard it with synthetic stimulants without causing structural damage. In the narrative of kidney failure, energy drinks represent the modern hubris of performance over health. They are the liquid manifestation of a society that values output over longevity. For the kidney, a delicate organ composed of millions of microscopic vessels, the energy drink is a battering ram. It creates a high-pressure, toxic, dehydrated environment that accelerates the wear and tear on the nephrons. The wings that these drinks promise are often the wings of Icarus, flying too close to the sun of metabolic capacity, only to crash into the reality of acute renal injury and chronic disease.
9. The solvent in the bloodstream, the systemic toxicity of heavy alcohol consumption. Entry number 9 demands that we strip away the veneer of social lubrication and celebratory tradition to view alcohol for what it chemically is, a potent multi-system toxin and a diuretic solvent. While the liver is culturally understood as the primary victim of heavy drinking, the kidneys are the silent collateral damage in a war of attrition waged by ethanol. The relationship between alcohol and renal failure is not merely a matter of one bad night. It is a complex physiological cascade involving dehydration, hypertension, electrolyte derangement, and the catastrophic collapse of the hepatorenal axis. To understand why heavy alcohol consumption is a direct path to the dialysis chair, we must deconstruct the intricate fluid dynamics of the human body and how ethanol systematically dismantles the delicate homeostasis required for survival. The primary mechanism of injury begins with the suppression of vasopressin, also known as the antidiuretic hormone, ADH. In a functioning, sober body, the brain releases ADH to tell the kidneys to conserve water. The hormone binds to receptors in the collecting ducts of the nephrons, allowing water to be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, thereby concentrating the urine. Alcohol acts as a pharmacological inhibitor of
of this hormone. When you consume alcohol, the brain stops sending the save water signal. The kidneys, blinded to the body's hydration status, open the floodgates. They dump water into the bladder at a rate far exceeding the fluid intake. This is why a night of heavy drinking results in frequent urination and the profound, throbbing dehydration of a hangover. But for the kidneys, this is not just an inconvenience, it is a functional crisis. The rapid loss of fluid volume creates a state of hypovolemia. The blood becomes thicker, more viscous. The kidneys rely on a specific perfusion pressure to filter waste. When blood volume drops due to alcohol-induced diuresis, the pressure plummets, and the kidneys are starved of oxygenated blood. Repeated episodes of this acute dehydration cause cumulative ischemic injury to the renal tubules, the microscopic structures responsible for ion exchange. However, the assault is not limited to fluid loss. We must confront the undeniable link between alcohol and hypertension. Heavy drinking is one of the most common reversible causes of high blood pressure.
Ethanol stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight mechanism, flooding the body with adrenaline and noradrenaline. It also activates the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, RAS, the very system designed to regulate blood pressure. By artificially triggering these systems, alcohol forces the blood vessels to constrict, driving up systemic pressure. As we have established in previous entries, the kidney is a vascular organ. It is a ball of capillaries. When the systemic blood pressure rises, the delicate glomerular capillaries are hammered by the force of the flow. Over years of heavy drinking, this pressure causes the vessel walls to thicken and harden, arteriolosclerosis, narrowing the lumen and reducing the kidney's filtering capacity. It is a cruel irony. Alcohol initially dehydrates the body, lowering pressure, but chronic use rewires the nervous system to maintain a permanent state of hypertension, grinding the nephrons into dust. A deeper, more sinister mechanism exists in the connection between the liver and the kidneys, known as the hepatorenal syndrome. This is the end game for the heavy drinker. When the liver is damaged by chronic alcohol abuse, progressing from fatty liver to fibrosis to cirrhosis, the blood flow through the liver is obstructed. This creates portal hypertension, high pressure in the liver's vein. In a desperate attempt to relieve this pressure, the body releases vasodilators, like nitric oxide, into the splanchnic circulation, the gut. This causes blood to pool in the abdomen, reducing the effective blood volume circulating to the rest of the body. The kidneys, sensing this drop in effective blood flow, panic. They aggressively constrict their own blood vessels to maintain pressure. This intense renal vasoconstriction chokes off the blood supply to the kidney tissue. The kidneys are structurally normal, but they shut down because the failing liver has created a hemodynamic environment in which they cannot function. This is a tragic, often fatal spiral where the liver kills the kidney. We must also investigate the direct cellular toxicity of alcohol on the kidney. Ethanol metabolism produces acetaldehyde, a highly reactive and toxic byproduct. While the liver handles the bulk of this, the kidneys also possess the enzymes alcohol dehydrogenase and cytochrome P452E1 to metabolize alcohol.
This local metabolism in the kidney generates massive amounts of reactive oxygen species, ROS, free radicals that attack the lipid membranes of the renal cells. This oxidative stress leads to inflammation and cell death, apoptosis, within the kidney itself. Furthermore, heavy alcohol consumption depletes the body's stores of magnesium, phosphate, and potassium. These electrolytes are not just salts, they are the electrical currency of the cells. Hypomagnesemia, low magnesium, common in alcoholics, is directly linked to the development of diabetes and hypertension, closing the loop on the risk factors for kidney failure. The phenomenon of rhabdomyolysis in the context of alcohol cannot be ignored. This is a condition where muscle tissue breaks down and releases myoglobin into the bloodstream. In the context of heavy drinking, this often happens due to Saturday night palsy, passing out in an awkward position for hours, cutting off circulation to a limb, or falling and sustaining muscle trauma. The alcohol-induced coma prevents the person from moving, leading to muscle necrosis. The released myoglobin is a large protein that acts like a sludge in the kidney's filtration tubules. It physically clogs the filter and is chemically toxic to the tubular cells. Combined with the dehydration caused by the alcohol, this creates a perfect storm for acute kidney injury, AKI. A single night of binge drinking that ends in a fall or a passed-out slumber can result in a wake-up call in the ICU with kidneys that have completely shut down. Culturally, we have normalized heavy drinking to a dangerous degree. The distinction between social drinking and heavy consumption has been blurred by the rise of binge culture, where consuming 5 or more drinks in a row is considered a standard weekend activity. The marketing of alcohol portrays it as a reward, a stress reliever, and a necessary component of social bonding. This narrative conveniently omits the physiological reality that ethanol is a type 1 carcinogen and a systemic poison. The concept of the functional alcoholic masks the internal devastation occurring within the vascular and renal systems. High-functioning executives or parents who rely on a bottle of wine a night to unwind are subjecting their kidneys to a nightly cycle of dehydration, pressure spikes, and oxidative stress. The French paradox, the idea that red wine is heart healthy, has done a disservice to public understanding of renal health.
While resveratrol, an antioxidant in wine, has some theoretical benefits, the alcohol content itself negates them when consumed in excess. For the kidney, there is no healthy amount of a diuretic toxin that raises blood pressure. The line between moderate and heavy is often crossed without realization as tolerance builds. What was once one glass becomes 3. What was once a weekend indulgence becomes a daily necessity. Finally, we must consider the interaction between alcohol and medication. Many individuals with early-stage kidney issues or hypertension are on medications like ACE inhibitors, diuretics, or NSAIDs. Alcohol interacts dangerously with these drugs. It can potentiate the blood pressure-lowering effects of some, leading to dizziness and falls, or it can interfere with the metabolism of others, leading to toxicity. For a person already managing kidney risk factors, alcohol is the wild card that destabilizes their entire treatment regimen. In the final forensic analysis, heavy alcohol consumption is a form of chemical erosion. It does not destroy the kidney overnight, unless through acute rhabdomyolysis, but rather wears it down through decades of fluid swings, pressure spikes, and toxic exposure. It forces the kidney to work in a hostile environment of dehydration and oxidative stress. By the time the liver begins to show signs of failure, the kidneys have often been suffering in silence for years, victims of a hepatorenal bond that turns fatal under the influence of the bottle. The happy hour comes with a bill that is paid in nephrons, and for the heavy drinker, the account is rapidly overdrawn.
10. The natural fallacy, the renal toxicity of unregulated supplements and herbal products. The final entry in our investigation brings us to the wild west of the modern health landscape, the unregulated supplement and herbal industry. This is perhaps the most insidious entry on the list because it thrives on the subversion of trust. Consumers turn to supplements not to indulge in vice, as with alcohol or sugar, but in a genuine attempt to improve their health. They are driven by the natural fallacy, the dangerous and scientifically illiterate belief that because a substance comes from a plant or the earth, it is inherently safe and superior to synthetic pharmaceuticals. This misconception has filled nephrology wards with patients whose kidneys have been destroyed by wellness teas, muscle-building powders, and ancient herbal remedies. The supplement industry, shielded by legislative loopholes and fueled by anti-science skepticism, has become a major vector for toxic nephropathy. To understand the scale of this threat, we must examine the regulatory vacuum in which these products exist. In the United States, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHA of 1994, essentially classified supplements as food rather than drugs. This means that unlike a pharmaceutical, which must prove safety and efficacy through rigorous clinical trials before it hits the market, a supplement can be sold with virtually no pre-market testing. The FDA can only step in after harm has been done and proven. This innocent until proven guilty approach effectively turns the general population into test subjects. Manufacturers are responsible for their own quality control, leading to a market flooded with products that are mislabeled, contaminated, or adulterated with hidden prescription drugs. The most chilling example of herbal nephropathy is the story of aristologic acid. This compound, found in plants of the Aristologia genus, is used in traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, for everything from weight loss to pain relief. In the 1990s, a tragedy unfolded in a Belgian slimming clinic where over 100 women developed rapid end-stage kidney failure after taking a weight loss herb that was inadvertently swapped with Aristologia fangqi. The condition was initially dubbed Chinese herb nephropathy. Further investigation revealed that aristologic acid is one of the most potent renal carcinogens and toxins known to man. It binds to the DNA in the kidney cells,
causing a specific mutation, AT to TA transversion, that not only kills the cell, causing fibrosis, scarring, but also inevitably leads to urothelial cancer. This discovery solved a decades-old medical mystery known as Balkan endemic nephropathy, where villagers in the Balkans were dying of kidney failure because they were eating bread made from wheat contaminated with Aristolochia weeds growing in the fields. Despite global bans, aristolochic acid continues to be found in herbal blends purchased online, often hidden under obscure names or due to botanical misidentification. Beyond specific plant toxins, we must address the issue of heavy metal contamination in Ayurveda and traditional medicines. Ayurveda, the traditional medicine of India, often uses bhasmas, calcined preparations of metals like lead, mercury, and arsenic, under the belief that the processing detoxifies them and renders them therapeutic. Modern toxicology refutes this entirely. Lead and mercury are direct nephrotoxins. They accumulate in the renal tubules, poisoning the enzymes responsible for energy production in the cells. Lead exposure leads to saturnine gout and chronic interstitial nephritis, a slow, scarring process that shrinks the kidneys over time. A study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that 20% of Ayurvedic supplements sold online contain detectable levels of lead, mercury, or arsenic. Consumers taking these products for detoxification are, in a cruel twist of irony, poisoning their filters with heavy metals that have a half-life in the body measured in decades. The sports supplement industry is another minefield. Creatine, while generally safe for healthy individuals, can pose a risk for those with pre-existing undiagnosed kidney issues. Creatine breaks down into creatinine, the very marker used to measure kidney function. While this doesn't
always mean damage. The high protein load associated with muscle-building diets, as discussed in entry number 5, combined with the dehydration of intense training, place significant stress on the renal system. More dangerous are the pre-workout stimulants and fat burners. These often contain unregulated stimulants like DMAA or excessive caffeine variants that cause acute vasoconstriction and rhabdomyolysis. Furthermore,
Anabolic steroids, often sold illicitly as supplements or found as hidden contaminants, cause a specific type of kidney injury known as focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, FSGS. This is a scarring of the glomeruli driven by the massive muscle growth outpacing the kidney's filtration capacity, combined with the direct toxic effects of the steroids. We also see the rise of detox teas and water pills. These products rely on herbal diuretics like dandelion leaf, juniper, or uva ursi to force water loss. The user sees the scale drop and assumes fat loss, but it is merely dehydration. Chronic use of these diuretics activates the renin-angiotensin system, leading to electrolyte imbalances, hypokalemia, and potential kidney damage. Even worse, some diet teas historically contained ephedra, banned but sometimes lingering in gray markets, or laxatives like senna, which can cause severe dehydration and electrolyte disturbances that stop the heart or shut down the kidneys. The danger is compounded by the botanical interaction problem. Kidney patients, particularly transplant recipients, are on a strict regimen of immunosuppressants like tacrolimus or cyclosporin. St. John's wort, a common herbal antidepressant, induces liver enzymes, CYP3A4, that chew up these medications. A transplant patient taking St. John's wort can metabolize their anti-rejection meds too fast, leading to organ rejection and kidney loss. Conversely, other herbs can inhibit metabolism, leading to toxic levels of the drugs. The lack of warning labels on supplements means patients are often unaware they are sabotaging their own life-saving treatment. The cultural impact of this industry is driven by a profound mistrust of big pharma. While pharmaceutical companies have their own issues, their products are chemically defined, dosed, and monitored. The supplement industry has successfully branded itself as the natural alternative, co-opting the language of wellness to sell undefined chemical mixtures. The consumer assumes that if it's on the shelf at a health food store, it must be safe. This assumption is false. The kidneys, as the body's filtration units, are the first to encounter these ingested unknowns. When a person swallows a capsule containing a proprietary blend of 20 exotic roots and extracts, they are asking these to process a complex chemical assay that may contain allergens, heavy metals, or direct toxins.
The philosophical implication here is the loss of scientific rigor in personal health management. We have replaced evidence-based medicine with marketing-based hope. The appeal to nature is a logical fallacy that kills. Cyanide is natural, botulism is natural, aristologic acid is natural. The kidney does not care about the origin of a molecule, it cares about its toxicity. By engaging in the unregulated consumption of these products, we are treating our bodies as chemistry sets. In conclusion, the unregulated supplement industry represents a hidden epidemic of renal injury. It is a sector where the pursuit of health has been weaponized against the consumer. From the carcinogens in Chinese herbs to the lead in Ayurvedic ash and the hidden steroids in gym powders, the risks are diverse and lethal. The kidney is a resilient organ, but it cannot defend itself against agents that destroy its DNA or poison its cellular machinery. The final advice in this investigation is one of extreme caution. In a world of unregulated powders and pills, the safest intake is often none at all. The best way to detox the kidneys is not with a tea, but by allowing them to do their job without the interference of unverified, potentially toxic substances. The price of the natural cure is too often the artificial kidney.